Randy Pittman Jr. is out at UCF for the Knights. So who's left to step up for Scott Frost at the tight end position?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Joining me as he does every week, all week, is my good friend Andrew Gluco, purveyor of all things UCF. He's been covering UCF sports for a very, very long time. He actually graduated from UCF as well, so he holds a degree from UCF. And Andrew, two degrees from UCF. Andrew, we're talking tight end today at the request of our commenters. They wanted to hear about tight end. We got a lot of great feedback about our recent episode on wide receiver and running back. But people want to know what's going on in that tight end room, and we are delivering today. Before we jump into today's topic, we're going to cover, who's leaving. Obviously, you heard the cold open there with Randy Pittman Jr. going out. It's a lot of production leaving. We'll talk about who's next and then what to expect at that position. Talk to me about Scott Frost's offense real quick and how tight ends are generally used in his system.
Well, at his first stint at UCF, he was a little bit spoiled. He had Jordan Akins, who's nothing short of an athletic freak. Was a little bit older, went to, did his a stint in baseball and then came back for football. Started as a wide receiver, got hurt. That didn't work out. But converting him to tight end was absolutely perfect. And the fact he's still in the NFL now just shows how much that was a good fit. So the truth is, you're not going to often get a guy of Jordan Akins' quality. But Randy Pittman was not that far off. He may not have had the same raw speed, but he was a hell of a blocker and very sure hands. You could argue that he probably had the most consistent hands on the team last year. Obviously the receiving side of the ball struggled because the quarterback couldn't get them the ball, but he had very sure hands, and you had to respect that. He caught the big Hail Mary touchdown in the space game against Arizona. But he made a lot of other good plays, and he was just a very consistent blocking tight end as well. That's a major loss. And, this is going to be a challenge for Scott Frost here at UCF. He's never had to really, develop a guy from scratch or bring in someone from the portal and acclimate him in. That may not be as athletically talented as Pittman or Akins. This is definitely a as far as his UCF tenure, new territory. Obviously, he worked in Nebraska on this, but everything kind of went belly up in Nebraska, even with talent. They just couldn't convert. UCF being in Florida, it's kind of a different animal. Built for speed. That's the athletes you find here in the Sunshine State, as opposed to trying to attract players into corn country. It's a different monster, and it's more easily done down in the Southeast, as you know from your experience covering Southeastern football. You can find this kind of talent that you need, the speed guy, much more easily here, and find them and attract them to a Southeastern school than you would somewhere in the Midwest. So I think Frost would have an easier time getting a guy who's talented enough to fit the bill. But as far as, finding someone who is as talented as Akins or Pittman, that's a very tough thing to pull off. But I think they can at least mitigate it.
Yeah, look, as we mentioned, Randy Pittman Jr., he's gone.
He gone.
And he leaves over 400 yards of tight end production. That's how big the hole that he's leaving there out of that. So, but let's jump into, again, who was in that room. We've got a graphic here for you guys if you're listening on podcast. The first column is tight ends that were on the roster last year. Of course, we mentioned Randy Pittman Jr. highlighted there, Kylan Fox, Evan Morris, Thomas Wadsworth, Jordan Davis, Grant Stevens, and Reese Atkins. So those guys were on the roster. I don't want to spend a ton of time here. But after the season, they made some additions. You had Dylan Wade, the transfer from Maryland, that comes into this tight end room. As we mentioned, it's going to be a new look tight end room. Dylan Wade is going to be part of that. Talk to me about Dylan Wade real quick, man, before we move on. As I mentioned, Dylan Wade there in the right column, added after the 2024 season, the transfer from Maryland.
Well, Dylan Wade, coming from Maryland, 29 catches, 374 yards, 2 touchdowns. Talented guy. He's by far has the most production out of any of these tight ends. And I would have him penciled in as your starter at this point. He's got experience. He knows how to be the guy. And you look at what Randy Pittman did last year. He did 32 catches, 416 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Not a huge difference. Granted, Pittman had a better year in 23, not from a yardage standpoint, but from a productivity quality standpoint. He didn't play as much. There was other guys ahead of him. But when he was on the field, he made a difference. Yeah, obviously last year was Pittman's sophomore year, and he didn't have a quarterback really worth a whole lot. Maryland, it was, a very mixed bag of how the passing game worked over the Terrapins, but they played against some really tough defenses over in the Big Ten. But I think Dylan Wade, he's an Orlando guy, went to Jones High School, coming back home. I call this the RJ Harvey effect, where you can come, you go somewhere else, you spend a little bit of time, you realize, hey, there's something back home that I can do something special with. And you come back. And, RJ Harvey did it. He's an Orlando product, went to Virginia, came back and became a legend. And I can see more and more players do this. Gus Malzahn actually did a pretty good job of promoting this concept of bringing players home, the hometown heroes. This is something I expect Scott Frost to fully embrace and continue as time goes on. Obviously, freshman recruiting is important, but you're going to have to utilize the portal. And as I said before, the talent in the Southeast is just, exactly what Scott Frost needs. And if you look at the Central Florida area, from Tampa to Daytona up to Ocala and down, you can even go all the way to South Florida on this. There's a massive alumni base that just keeps growing. The talent out there is just immense. Lots of speed. That is prototypical Scott Frost, and to bring them back home. After they go somewhere, they enjoy the pomp and circumstance of the college recruiting experience. They go to, a blue blood school or someone with a little more cachet than a UCF, realizes, what, I'm growing up a little bit. The grass is not always greener. I'm ready to come back home so my parents can watch me play. And that's the guy that Scott Frost, pounces on to bring home. And you're going to see more and more of these players that are from the Central Florida area. They go off somewhere else, and then a year or two later, they come back home. Sincere Edwards, a great example. UCF had him and then lost him late to Pitt, and then they got him back. And now he's penciled in to be a starter on the defensive side of the ball. Same concept. You may lose him in the high school recruiting ground, but that doesn't mean it's over. There's something special about, like, once you get, grow up a little bit, what? I'm seeing the big picture. I want my family there at those games, support me and see me play. I'm going back home. I'm going to UCF.
Yeah, look, Dylan Wade, the transfer from Maryland, as you mentioned, could be a key piece for them. There's going to be a lot of competition in that room. So who's next? Who's he going to be competing with? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, or golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer, yes, soccer, you can bet on soccer, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? Put a little cash down with FanDuel. You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. My tan looks good. I'd rather be on FanDuel having some more fun. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet up to just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. Guys, it's a no-brainer. Who else is next? So we got a lot to get to here, so I'm gonna pull back up our main graphic so we can continue the conversation. We talked about Mr. Dillon Wade, the transfer from Maryland. They pick up Max Drag. They also got Kaden Peening. So just so everybody knows, we researched heavily before the show started to try to figure out if we're pronouncing this young man's name right. So if we are not, feel free to correct us. But Kaden Peening was the only high school addition to this room. Talk to me about Kaden Peening real quick. He joins the UCF Knights.
Peening joins from Cincinnati, Ohio, is aspiring to be the East Coast Gronkowski. That he's said that in multiple interviews. That's something he's kind of aspired for. Obviously, Gronkowski went to schools on the West Coast. I believe it was Arizona, and then you have Peening, who Peening was from Ohio, now going to UCF. So that's his goal. Obviously, you got to work your way up the system, but this is a very unique roster this year. This is probably the position that you have the most upward mobility because you have the most unusual makeup of players. And we'll talk more about that, but this is definitely a unique position group as opposed to, even quarterback, running back, any of those. You have one carryover basically in Kylan Fox, who does not have a whole lot. Basically, he had 3 catches for 22 yards. That's it. That's your holdover from 2024 coming over to 2025. So there's not a lot there. It's basically essentially a hard reset for, not 100%, but like 99%. It's a hard reset. So that's why a guy like Dillon Wade has so much value. And a guy like Peening can work his way up the system if he, develops the proper speed and acumen that Scott Frost is looking for.
Yeah, I agree. Look, Kaden Peening, 46 receptions, 782 yards in his senior year per Max Preps. That's 17 yards per catch, Andrew, and about 55 receiving yards per game. He had 7 receiving touchdowns, 8 total. He was ranked 62nd in Ohio for receiving yards. Look,
it's pretty good for a tight end.
Not bad for a tight end. In high school at that. So Kaden Peening joins this. We have talked so much on this show about the development piece for Scott Frost. Finding guys who fit your system, who want to come in and work, who aren't overly focused on money coming right through the door, because if it's a money conversation, you're going to lose with a lot of the top kids. And they've got to excel at the development piece. Peening is one of those kids you can get a hold of, and we'll see. We'll see what he's got here. Jumping back to our list, we have a fun conversation to have with a couple of guys that joined the tight end room. The first is Dominic Campbell from Howard. Now, this is such an interesting story. I want everyone at home to know. We spend a ton of time researching before every single podcast, verifying facts and just looking at stuff. Hours of digging, and you could not find anything about Dominic Coleman playing football before this year. He is brand new to football, pretty good basketball player at Howard, and before that, he signed with Notre Dame.
And here's the thing. It's you look at his bio. Like, he's 6'9", 268. That's his list.
Big guy.
He's a big
huge
guy. So this guy has the agility to play basketball. If you can convert that to the power and toughness needed to play football, watch out. And this is a redshirt junior. So you've got 2 years of eligibility out of Campbell. He was a freshman at Notre Dame, played basketball, transferred to Howard, played his sophomore year, played part of his junior year, and then redshirted the rest of the way, played the first 8 games and then shut it down. So you got a guy with 2 years of eligibility, and, he's built. If you can convert that kind of, this kind of size, almost 270 pounds into the right mindset, because football's a mental game.
It is.
Let's start. If you're mentally not in it, it doesn't matter how strong you are. You're out. This is a mental game. So now he has to change from the non-contact of basketball to the full contact of football. That's a major adjustment of that kind of aggression and strategic movement. Because as a blocker, if you're run blocking, there's that explosiveness where you have to come up underneath those shoulder pads and drive a player up so he loses that center of gravity and push him back. If you're staying home in pass protection, there's the agility of moving your legs and being able to pop and back up and maintain the pocket. Now, then you have the bump and run where you give a good bump to that edge rusher or whoever's on the outside, slow them down just enough. But you also got to remember, you're going to get hit in the process, and you can't lose focus on where you need to be, but you also can't lose physically, your momentum, your center of gravity, because you fall over, you take yourself out of the play. So there's a lot of things that has to go into the conversion process from a guy who does not have football experience that we could find. I mean, maybe he played some peewee level or something, but we certainly could not find any high school related items. And we tried, we looked a lot.
Oh my goodness.
And we couldn't find anything. And so it's like, okay, well, this guy's brand new. He's a project, but because he's got 2 years of eligibility, that's okay. Look at RJ Harvey. He came over he was a quarterback at Virginia and had to learn the college game as a running back, without as much of a base. Now, granted, he ran the ball a lot in high school, but it's still a different way of playing. And you had to, learn blocking mechanics and all this other stuff. So, I mean, he was a project at first. He was raw, but you could see the talent just everywhere in the spring game before he got hurt and lost that first season. And then the rest is history. So, I mean, there's a possibility that Dominic Campbell could kind of repeat the same process as far as learning a new position, in this case, learning a new sport and rising up over time.
Yeah, look, Dominic Campbell, such an interesting. I think he watched some football a couple of years ago on TV. He may have played NCAA football. Brand new to the.
I learned from Madden
position, and football in general. But look, interestingly enough, he's not the only basketball transfer. Debo Coleman transfers from UCF basketball to UCF football. We talk about development. Athletes are athletes. If you're Scott Frost, and if you can work with a guy like Debo Coleman, who's been on campus there, obviously understands the city and the school, probably has gone to every football game. Talk to me about this switch over. Now, you aren't the biggest Debo Coleman fan on the basketball court, but could we
I really wasn't.
Andrew Gluco to a Debo Coleman fan on the football field?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. Now, unlike Campbell, we did find football history with Debo Coleman. He played his freshman and sophomore years of high school. He did more on defense than offense. He was actually a pretty good player on defense, logging a number of interceptions. I think he led his team his sophomore year, but then, focused on basketball. 6'6", 210, that's light for a tight end. He's going to have to bulk up some. That's his current listed weight as far as the 2025 football rosters, listing. That's kind of small. He's got the height taken care of, no problem there, but he's going to have to bulk up. if he's going to play tight end. It's a lot different story than Campbell, who's already built like a beast. You need to at least get to like close to 230, in my opinion, to be able to handle the rigors of blocking as a tight end. So Coleman's a little bit more of a project, in my opinion, but you have less time with him. You have 1 year. The truth is he used up all his basketball eligibility. And so that's partly why he ended up in football. He's still at UCF. You've got that extra year of academic eligibility. So he was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go play football. Why not? Yeah, I don't know if he's going to play anything material on offense. He may be a special teamers. I think Coleman's going to stay buried in the depth chart. But you know what? Go do you. Go enjoy it. Have fun. It's something different. It keeps it keeps you active. I like it from the standpoint of he wants to continue pursuing athletics. And okay. Do I think he's going to make a material impact on UCF football? No, I really don't. But you know what? You need that depth in the tight end group.
Sure.
They get beat up a lot. It's just the nature of the position. And you look at what UCF had last year. They basically had a guy who was a workhorse in Randy Pittman. You're going to need to have a degree of rotation. Unlike Gus Malzahn, who claimed to run tempo and then didn't, Scott Frost is going to run tempo. So at times, you have an incomplete pass. You're going to have to get some rotations going, and those second and third tight ends are probably going to get a decent amount of snaps. That's just your opportunity to rise up. And if you're on the field, there's a chance of injury. So next man up, you got to be ready. But I don't think Coleman's going to play a major role on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There's just too much above him. Looking up in the tight end room.
Yeah, I wonder for a guy like him if he could come in and block at a high enough level at that position. That's
my concern.
Yeah, like it would be blocking would be my concern, certainly. Jumping back to our list here, again, Dominic Campbell and Debo Coleman both making the switch from basketball to football for the Knights here. Now, as we mentioned earlier in this segment, Kylan Fox is the only returning production from the tight end room from 2024. So, look, outside of Randy Pittman Jr. and his 400 plus yards receiving, there's not a ton going on in this tight end room, man. I think 6 total catches by all the other tight ends last year outside. And Kylan Fox had 3 of them.
Right. I think it was 6 catches for 38 yards total between Fox and the rest of the guys. Grant Stevens,
Reese Atkins,
and I think Evan Morris had
Evan Morris,
a little bit of action there. And then Morris actually did more as a kickoff specialist once Colton Boomer left the program. So his value was converted over to special teams. But that just shows how good Pittman was and how bad UCF's missing him after Gus Malzahn stole him back to Florida State. I think we should file a report for theft here.
Oh, yeah. Gus, come on, man. You didn't have to take Randy Pittman Jr. You could have left him on the roster. That guy, the gift that keeps on giving, Gus Malzahn. I should mispronounce his name just because he took Randy. He was Malzahn today. You're a Malzahn. Yeah. But look, Randy Pittman Jr. is going to be missed. How I know it's not a ton of production, but if you're Kylan Fox, in your opinion, does any of his experience help him here? It's a brand new coach, obviously, but it feels like it's going to be an all-out war in that tight end room for playing time.
Absolutely. I think Dylan Wade has definitely a leg up over everybody else. But you look at Kylan Fox, Max Drag, other guys who've come through the portal. I think once you get past Wade, it's pretty open, and that second, third tight end they're going to get playing time. So I think Fox is in a good position to really establish himself as a rotational player and get in on some action. He's only a sophomore. So, he's young. He's got a lot of room to develop. And, as we, when we did our last show, one of the comments was, aside from just talking about the tight ends, was the need to develop tight ends. And while I don't think it's imperative that it's make or break on a team of how your tight ends develop, it's important to just develop your players in general. And, if you got a guy that you came in as a freshman, those are the best kind of guys to build up. You want those guys who stick with you, the Paul Rubelts of the world, who started from day one as a freshman, worked his way up and grew and became a better player. I mean, there's no reason why a guy like Kylan Fox can't do the same thing. So I think he's got a great opportunity to fill in that second tight end role, maybe third. But the Kaden Peening kind of falls in the same category as you're joining a group that's just because you got two players coming from the basketball world. You have an opportunity to really jump up the depth charts and really make a name for yourself and really break through. There's, you're dealing with a group that has 3 catches to its name from 2024 UCF. That's why Dillon Wade has so much value, because he had over 300 yards receiving as as a very, contributing tight end over at Maryland. The other guys, there's not much there. So I think a guy like Fox, a guy like Peening, they have a real chance to make an impact with this Frost offense, which is, hit the reset button.
I agree with you. Look, there's going to be parity in the tight end room, and there's going to be opportunity, given that you had to flip so much of this roster. If you're Scott Frost in year one, guys should be excited about, essentially being able to start from zero with a brand new coach and work their way up the depth chart as we get inch closer to fall camp. So some of these races are going to have to flesh themselves out. What do we expect from the tight end room this season headed into the fall? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. What do we expect, Andrew? Let's recap here. Randy Pittman Jr., he gone. There goes all the production. He was a dog. I wish nothing but terrible things for him at Florida State.
No penny there.
Kylan Fox returns. He is not gone. He is the only returning production in the tight end room. As I mentioned, there wasn't a ton outside of Randy Pittman Jr., only 6 total catches by all the other tight ends. He was 50% of that. Kaden Peening, the freshman, joins the team. He is the only freshman addition at that position. And then we get Dominic, Campbell, and Debo Coleman, a pair of guys that are transferring from basketball to football there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this pair has an effect, if any. Can they use them on special teams? Is there anywhere that these guys fit in that could help UCF football in 2025? We'll see. So just kind of going back to our list here. Again, I don't want to forget Max Drag still on the roster. Thomas Wadsworth still on the roster as well. As we transition into close the show to talking about what we expect, who is your guy? Who is your true leader in the clubhouse right now? Well, who's your projected tight end one? Who's the guy that stands out in this group to you?
Oh, it's Dillon Wade. The transfer from Maryland. He's definitely the guy. He has experience. He's been playing. He's got multiple, more than 3 receptions to say the least. I mean, he's 29 catches. And played in all 12 games. Obviously, Maryland did not play in postseason. He played 11 games in 2023. So while he didn't do a whole lot overall, I mean, he still has game experience more so than these other players, and he has productivity. So he's easily my number 1 projected guy. And then I have Kylan Fox as number 2. There's continuity coming over from UCF. The productivity just drops off after you get past Wade. So as far as what to expect from the tight end, there's going to be some growing pains. I expect UCF to run a bit more of a balanced offense, especially earlier in the year when running back is going to be your strength. Quarterback's got some question marks, and wide receiver, you got some talent there, but it's all new talent, and it has to kind of coalesce a bit. I think it's going to be a little bit easier for the running backs to kind of embrace the roles that they have versus the wide receiver tight end. So I expect a bit more balance, which means blocking is going to be a thing. That's where you really want a guy like, Dom Campbell to really grow. Cause I mean, he's built, we've already talked about that. And just, his size is just immense. So, you have high hopes that, he could be a great blocking tight end, that when you have your two tight end sets that you can use as a guy that's just going to, bowl over edge rushers that are going to be smaller than him. But as far as the passing game goes, they're going to go vertical. So you need a player that has good hands and has enough speed to kind of go over the top of linebackers. And, that's another thing that, maybe one of these basketball converts really embrace that part of the game and just really excel at having that burst of speed and the hands. If you can utilize 6'6", 6'9" height over, a 6'2" linebacker, I mean, that vertical matters, and you can, play those jump balls and in the back of the end zone. There's value in that. So I think the tight end position is going to be, more run blocking than we'd probably expect to see in a normal Scott Frost offense, at least for year one. For year two, it's going to convert probably more to a receiving based one as they develop a quarterback.
Yeah.
That's definitely up in the air because, I'm not fully sold on the quarterback position yet. That has a lot of question marks, more so than the other positions. So if you have a quarterback who can't throw, which we've seen happen, you're going to have to rely on the run game.
Yeah.
There's your blocking.
Let me tell you, when you don't trust your quarterback, we tend to see a lot more 12 personnel. So you'll keep two tight ends in to block. You may run one out to, catch a pass here and there, but they will keep those tight ends in, max protect, try to give the quarterback as much time to pass. Last year under Gus Malzahn, Randy Pittman Jr., 32 receptions, which is pretty good for a tight end in today's game, right? So he definitely got his usage. As a matter of fact, of all the receivers, he was second only to Kobe Hudson in receptions. Kobe had 47 last year. So of your 454 tight end yards, Randy Pittman Jr. was 416 of that.
Yeah.
Do you see, talk to me, man, do you see a receiver in this group, right, that can be 91% of all the tight end yards, or do we see that a little bit more evenly distributed? How do you see that usage when we compare it to what Randy Pittman Jr. was able to get in terms of usage rate versus what these guys, the opportunity these guys have?
Well, I mean, if you look at Maryland's stats last year, Dylan Wade, 29 catches, but the next tight end was Preston Howard with 24. So they use the tight ends a lot, but they distribute a lot. And so I expect not quite that close in parity, but I think Wade's easily going to get like 2/3 of production, maybe 3/4. And then it's going to go as far as the tight end production from the receiving side. And then it's going to go down, cascade down to your bench players. But Wade was third on the team in yards, 374, but he was actually fifth in receptions. This was a team that threw the ball a lot. Their leading receiver had 96 catches. And then it went 96, 56, 40, 30, and then Wade at 29. So, I mean, 29 is still, active, but this was a pass-happy offense. So, you didn't have an RJ Harvey that you could rely on and just, dedicate to the run. UCF's running core, pretty talented. You got four really great guys, with Nixon, Montgomery, Gage, and Swint. So, I don't expect UCF to utilize the pass nearly as much as Maryland did. But I expect them to use the run to set up the pass and then go over the top, and create those mismatches and utilize the tempo, tire out those linebackers, and then use the tight ends to make those key catches. So again, I think Wade could easily be 2/3 to 3/4 of the tight end production at from a receiving standpoint. And then you have a player like a Kylan Fox, fall in and get, another, 25-30%, and then maybe a little bit below that in the scraps, short of an injury happening.
Yeah. Look, it's very interesting conversation, my friend, about tight end and what to expect at that position this year. We're going to continue our position group coverage as we get closer to fall camp. And then we're going to revisit some of these segments to see how those position battles fleshed out headed into week 1 game prep. Going to be a fun conversation as always. A little bit of a long one today. Who knew tight end would produce a 35-minute segment, but we did it here at Locked On UCF. You requested
challenge
it.
Accepted.
We delivered, and we will continue to deliver for UCF fans all year long. Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me as always on today's episode. Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at The Portal Show. Our guy Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed college football fan by watching The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can listen to us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.